Cape Palmas, mountain back to Atlantic Ocean, Obomi Hills to Country, to educate, elevate, and promote. Yeah, focus on Liberia, for Liberia, Liberia, for Liberia, yeah, 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 yeah. From Monday to Sunday, from Monday to Sunday, it's focus on Liberia. Talk about home affairs, hey, in diaspora, current affairs, reliable information, history, talking about culture, politics, education, entertainment, business, sports, advertisement, articulation. Focus on Liberia. Focus on Liberia. Focus on Liberia. From Monday to Sunday. Focus on.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another session of Focus on Liberia on the Marketplace. I am your host, Gabriel Carter. Today, we are going to be covering a recent speech by the Minister of Finance in terms of his radio appearance, I think about a week ago. So we're going to be talking about some of the things he talked about regarding the economy of Liberia, how he planned on taking the economy of Liberia to a low middle income state, and we're going to cover some of these things he talked about, such as the impact of the USAID, winning Liberia off of aid, but most importantly, how he talked about the debt that where we are in terms of the debt stock that we currently have, and the addition of potentially another another 1.3 billion dollar debt that we're going to take on with the addition of a new hydro. So we're going to talk about all of his speech. Hopefully, I will play it, be able to analyze it, and then have a conversation about it. I have a different opinion about most of the things that he talked about. However, as I said, these are my opinion. These are my thoughts about what he talked about. So wherever you are, I hope you shared the podcast, listen, bring your questions, your perspectives, and let's have a good discussion about this. Before we do that, just give me a few minutes. Let me share this thing on the other platform. Bear with me here. This is we're having difficulties on getting on Facebook. I don't know what's the issue here. Just bear with me here. Hopefully I can get this thing figured out. Today. Okay. Very limited options here. All right, let's try this one more time. So if you're getting this on the other platform, please do let me know in the comment section. If not, hopefully I can figure out a way to share this as well. But yeah, as I said, as I said last week, I watched the Minister of Finance appearance on. This thing is not sharing. It's not going through. Destination and streaming again. All right, give me 1 minute here. I don't know why it's. I hate challenges like these. All right, let me do this again. Voila. Huh. Okay, let's remove this. Okay, let's get this done. Let's do this. All right. All right. So as I said, this is this is going to be a very short, you know, discussion. I want to talk about, the Minister of Finance, and the reason why I even wanted to jump on this is because we have we are there is no short of, platforms that talk about everything in our body of politics. However, I think there are a few that actually do go in depth in terms of that cover our economic issues, right? Such as, the radio station that he appeared on. The journalist, to his credit, I think he did a good job in terms of the questions, how he laid out the question. He even pushed back on some of the uh, the narrative of the discussion that the Minister of Finance was, putting out there. You know, However, after that, there wasn't any, critique of some of the things that I think that were outlandish, claims and assertion that he made. There was nobody. I didn't see anybody or any platform pushing back on some of those things, such as how he believes that he wants to take Liberia to a low middle income state by 2029, which is in 5 years, right? You want to get Liberia to a middle income state, a low middle income state. I think that is too, it's not even too aggressive. The place where we are to get to that level is going to take years, more than 5 years, more than 10 years, if you ask me, right? So he made that assertion. He also talked about, the impact of aid, the USAID, you know, what they are doing. But most importantly, he also talked about the AID agenda, which is their economic plan that the Unity Party ran on, right? So I will play the video, in bit and pieces. Hopefully, we can get, some, you know, uh, feedback from there in terms of to really get a better understanding in terms of what the Minister of Finance wanted to say, right? And then we can have the discussion about that. All right, so let's jump into that.
In January. Well, the Ministry of Finance is at the center of running the economy. In January, we launched the government led by President Bokari. We're in Bikana, launching the AAID Agenda for Inclusive Development. It is our 5-year development plan that takes us from 2025 to 2029. Our ambition there is to grow the economy and make Liberia a lower middle incomes country by 2029. So we've started doing some work. As I said before, that is the plan. That is the plan, is the architecture that guides our activities. When the layman hears about plan, he may not understand sometimes what is the significance of the plan. But I usually say that the building of a good structure, a 99-story building, starts with a good plan. When you are about to construct the house and you go to an architect to do the drafting of the plan, you have actually started to build a house. Those that just rush to go and start putting bricks and mortar in foundation without a plan will sooner than later find out that whatever they put in is not sustainable or could collapse like a brick of cars. But by and large, we are happy that we have started executing the new budget. Last year, we told you to intervene in some critical sectors like the health, education, security. Yes, amidst our challenging fiscal space, we did some top-ups to salaries of people in the health sector. And I can announce that those top-ups started in January. And that, yes, In the education sector, some people were targeted. Those top ups started in January. In the security sector, we did some top ups for police, for EPS officers, for soldiers. Started in January. As of now, we are paying the insurance of police officers, and that yes, we haven't reached our target yet with these.
Okay, so I want to leave it there. What as I said, I want us to do this thing in bits and pieces, and in terms of, without, getting too much into the video, I want us to do this in bits and pieces. So first and foremost, I think this is the first time we've seen the Minister of Finance come on, and or maybe anybody from the Minister of Finance talk about this AID agenda, what it actually entails. And I think from the expose, his brief introduction there, right? He talks about there are two things he talked about the AID agenda, which is to grow the economy and to make Liberia a middle income state by 2029. So that's the two focus, right? And in addition to that, he also talked about intervention, right? So intervening meaning there are areas that are having challenges, and the Minister of Finance, from an economic standpoint, they're intervening in those areas. That is the health sector and also the security sector, right? And for me, I think, as I said earlier in the introduction of this video, we we have this idea of, you know glorifying people. To his credit, he was the former Minister of Finance. I don't know what he did before that. He served as the country manager for, I think, Uganda also. But for a country that we have right now in terms of Liberia, this post-war experiment that we're having in terms of how do we rebuild after 14 years of war, right? We need people who are innovative in every sector, in every department of that government. This is what we're not having. And to his credit, maybe he's a budget guy, but not really a finance guy, not somebody who think globally in terms of how do you, when you say intervention, right? And this is what I wanted to call him out. Like, when you're watching the entire video, the entire hour long of this video, like, it's cringing. Like, you cringe when you hear some of the things that he said. Let's get a little bit into it. So he talks about intervention, which is, if you hear about intervention, you talk about, he call it top off, right? Top off meaning you start paying the healthcare workers more, right? Increasing the salary of the healthcare workers, which is great. But for the healthcare sector we have in Liberia, do you think by increasing the salary of those individuals have any granular impact in terms of the quality of healthcare you receive in our country, where there's a lack of machinery, there's a lack of talent, and there's a lack, those two areas, right? Those two areas, lack of machinery, lack of talent alone, right? It's one of two of the most important area that I believe, if you are going to intervene, you need to focus on. We don't have scanning machines. We don't have good nurses in those hospitals. So if you are going to intervene in terms of intervention, this is the place that I think you need to talk about. This is the area you need to talk about. Sit with the Minister of Health or whoever it is and see how you can intervene. But come in to say you're intervening by just tapping off salary of workers, it's a laughing intervention, right? The other, sorry here, I keep getting distracted here. Calls keep coming in. The second part he talked about is the security sector. He talks about, and I think this is one of the most important sector in our country, of our country, because for any democracy, you need safety for it to grow, right? And he talks about the police paying police insurance, the insurance of police officers, right? Again, for if you have been, following the news in Liberia, you know there's a training, there's a need for training in Liberia, training police officers. 2 weeks ago, I was in Liberia, right, where the police and the military, the AFL, actually got into a fight. Before that, the following week, it was the police and the motorbike kids, right, that got into a fight. So there's a need for training these people to de-escalate situation. Meaning, if something happened, if you are yelling and I'm yelling, nobody gets to resolve anything. In essence, what happens is it escalates because you're yelling, I'm yelling, and this is what always happened. This is how they were able to get into fight with the biker boys, you call them, and also the AFL, right? So there's a need for training. I understand his method of intervention. He's talking about paying their insurance. But if you're looking at it from a Minister of Finance standpoint, I think you need to look at the sector in its entirety in terms of providing quality training. So I think, as I said earlier, the guy, I don't want to attack, I'm not attacking his person. I'm just a little bit more taken aback in terms of some of the solution that he's offering to solve some of the problems that we have in our country. I will play the other part of the video so we can get into the other discussion. So the next part I want us to talk about is his assertion that he wants to take us to a middle income state in 5 years, right? Unless you have been living, under a rock, if you go to Liberia, we are just a group of people that are just clustered right in Monrovia, right? Our GDP per capita right now, as of 2023, is $771. Let me share with you what's considered the GDP per capita for middle income state by the World Bank, right? So the GDP per capita for World Bank is about 1,000, right? 1,000 up to 4,000. That's the low middle income countries. We are 771, right? And if you ask me, I don't think that 700 and it's not representative of the entire country. Meaning that is mostly to those in the upper echelon of the economy, those who work in the government and some of those NGOs in our country, right? Right. So if you are saying that you want to take this country from a low middle income, from a poor country to a low middle income state, there is the level of expansion that needs to happen economically has to be maybe 10 times more than what it is right now to do that. And in order to achieve that, you need, from our perspective, in terms of our country, in terms of the rate in which we're growing, and also the revenue we're collecting, and the entire GDP as well. You have to double the GDP to get us to that level. But I expected this to be something that he's maybe mostly aware of. But I believe, sometimes when you're in this position, you have to project a level of optimism, right? However, as numbers guys, if you have to be realistic in your projection as well. And I think he really overstepped that projection. And I think nobody was able to call him out on these things, right? So let's get into the video so you can see what I'm talking about here. All right.
But at least it's not as it was before. The judiciary has practically.
Let's jump right into that.
A lot of things, probably maybe job creation and the real bread and butter issue. We'll come to a particular issue, but give us a general look of the prospect of our economy.
The outlook still remains good. I think we project growth of about 6% this year. There are one or two shocks we're going to revisit and see what that will empty into with the growth projection. As I said, Clarence, you remember that in January, President Boyka led a team to the Africa Energy Summit. And I was part of that team, and the Minister of Energy, Honorable Wilmot Pay, and the folks from LEC. Liberia has been chosen by the World Bank and the African Development Bank as one of 12 African countries to develop what we call the Energy Compact. The Energy Compact, that is for our ambition between now to 2030. The energy access, people that have access to electricity in this country, just about around 30%. Our ambition is to take it up to 75 to almost 50% in this period. What are we going to do? We are intervening. We're talking about a new hydroelectric facility that will be called Simport 2. We're talking about solar. The solar generation going to scale up. The total cost is about 1.3 billion United States dollars. We have gotten funding commitments, and we are also going to be pumping government money in it. So as you are doing this, the layman may not understand all of these things, because sometimes these things get complicated. But what is it important to intervene in electricity? One of the constraints to growth, to job creation in this country, is the exorbitant cost of power. Now, when we are attacking power, when we're making it easy for you to get power, you know the amount of money you spend on electricity or buying fuel to run the generator. That is a major cost driver. It is sucking into the profits of business. It is killing small business. So when we've solved the problem of power, and things are going to be improving gradually.
Except that it is not a short-term kind of solution.
It's not short-term. Some of the solutions we are rolling out cannot be short-term, because these are structural problems. What are we doing in the roads? What are we putting monies in roads? Because it is often said that the road to development begins with the development of roads. If we, and as I see, sooner than later, in 2-3 years going forward, people will be able to drive from here to Hapa on Kota Road. Do you know what it means to the economy? There are parts of this country that produce a whole lot in agriculture, but because of bad road conditions, they don't connect.
Okay. So let's unpack that piece of it that he just talked about. And for me, I think the bulk of mine, me even coming on here to wanting to do this discussion was basically that piece of the clip that he just talked about. And as I said, I applaud his ambition, the ambition of the entire Ministry of Finance, and in terms of what they are trying to do. But in a country that is so far behind, yes, you want to inject some level of optimism, but you have to be realistic in your, when you come on these radio stations to make these press briefings or whatever you call them with the audience as well. In as much that I think the majority of us Liberians, we don't talk about these aspect of it. We just focus on the politics and the qualm. So nobody push back on you. There will be few people that will push back on these things when they hear these sessions. So let me unpack it a little bit. So hopefully you can make sense of it, right? First, he talked about the building of a second hydro plant, which is there's commitment for $1.3 billion, right? By 2029, he asserted that we're going to have roads from Monrovia to the southeast, which is in Maryland, and the what we call the snowball effect, the economic multiplied effect of the economics, which is those in the southeast will now be able to produce or be able to sell their goods wherever they want and have access to that. I think he kind of glossed over that piece of it as well, but I think he grossed over that piece of it as well in terms of trying to make sense of it, right? What I think most people don't understand is that the reality that are impeding some of these ambition that he's putting out here, right? And sometimes when people talk about these things, you have to look at the underlying derivatives of what are under these discussions that are being had, right? So there's $1.3 billion commitment that he allegedly said that we're getting. The other piece is that we have a debt stock of 2.6 billion, right? So within 4 years, let me make this simple. If you take us to that, you add that 1.3 to the 2.6, that is $3.9 billion debt, right? Let me tell you how far off we are from getting to a middle income state, and why I think if the Ministry of Finance and the entire government of Liberia do take on this project, we are going to become like the likes of Ghana, where we're going to keep defaulting. And if you don't have the right people in place to negotiate some of these deals, it is going to put us in an ugly place where nobody in our country will want to be. There is a debt right now for that $2.6 billion debt that we're carrying. In this part of this clip, he mentioned the debt service, which is 300 million to service the debt. This is just on the interest payment. This is not paying principals, right? To service the debt that we're carrying, 300 million. In this clip, and I think hopefully I will get to play, I will play that again. Hopefully I can find that part of it and play it. We are only paying $154 million debt service. So there's an entire 146 million that we're postponing, we're putting off. In addition to that 2.6, we're adding another $146 million every year that we're not servicing. So what is that doing? If you have credit card, you know what that means. That means you're adding on your debt because you're not servicing the entire, we're not even making the minimum payment. That 1.6, that 146 million that is being added onto the principal will also accrue interest. What does that mean? By the time we get to take on another 1.3 billion to add it to this 2.6, we're at 3.9. I will be liberal in my assertion in terms of my projection of the economy, right? Let's say even if the economy of Liberia grew within the next 5 years to 6 billion, we are now, I think we're 5.5. I would be liberal. I think last time I checked, we're at 5.4. But I would say right now we're at 5.5. Let's say in the next 5 years, we grew another 500 million. We're at $6 billion economy, right? That puts us at a 66% debt to GDP. And you can come back and say, Gabriel, oh, well, man, those things don't make sense. Okay. But we have currently almost over 50% debt to GDP. And the debt that we have on that 2.6, we're not servicing the entire amount. We're not making enough money, meaning that we're not paying enough into the debt. So if we are accruing another $1.3 billion debt, which would take us to 3.9 billion within the next 4 years or 5 years to 2029, that put us in a very uncomfortable situation. And these are the things that when they're doing these kind of narrative and come on the radio and talk about these projections and in terms of how the economy is going to grow, and people don't dive into these things, right? The other assertion he made was that, and I agree with him on this part, that the access to energy is tied to access to development. I mean, meaning to development. Meaning, if we can create access to energy, electricity, we can create. I believe if we have access to 24 hours electricity, I believe we can double our GDP, right? But we also have to do that in a more sustainable way. Meaning, just because that is true, we cannot just do that aggressively. Meaning, if as a Minister of Finance, if you want to do something like that, I will tackle the budget, right? We have enough money coming in. In as much our size, that may not be a lot, but 800 million is a lot of money. However, if you're not cutting the waste, where 80% or 90% of that budget is going to spending, you will continue to be in this cycle where you perpetuate. We are headed towards exactly the same place what we were when we came out of the war. Our debt, I think, was around that area. I think 4 billion or over. And we're right back there almost 22 years later. So what does that tell you? That tells you his projection. That tells you his projection in terms of his assertion to get us to a middle income country is, I think, the farthest dream that any minister of finance can wish for, especially with this kind of country that we have, right? And again, as I said, I know most of you revere this guy. I don't know him very well. I know someone that he's his deputy. I know his deputy very well, but I don't know this guy. You know, I don't know his track record. I know he was a former minister of finance. I know he just served in Uganda, but being someone who is a fiscal manager of a country and being a budget guy and really understand the intricacy of finance as it relate domestically or globally, I don't know his experience in those areas, right? And so I want to cut him a little bit of slack here. So this is why I wanted to do this video. But let's get into the second part of the video, right? And the next part is, give me 1 second here. Okay, so the next part of this video will be, this whole discussion is about the video, right? About his assertion. Let me get my next question here in terms of, bear with me here. Okay, so the next one is the aid. Let's talk about the aid, right? Let me see if I can bring up that video and get it back.
Farmers lack the incentive to produce because their products get rotten. Do you know what it means for us to do the road from here from Manga to Salaye to Vonjama to Medicoma? Transformative in terms of aid, in terms of donor support. Next to the World Bank, the U.S. through USAID have been Liberia's second largest partner. USAID aid does not typically pass through the budget.
Okay.
If you check the 2025 budget, you will see nothing there for USAID aid. You will see World Bank and others. USAID aid is not in the budget. You see EU. USAID grants support directly to projects and programs. And that government benefits in that if they were not intervening in those sectors, some of which are critical, we be to take up some of those things on budget. So although the aid is not on budget, but they are reducing the on budget pressures. Now, I need to tell you about aid. And this is a conversation in aid, in the aid space. Typically, every $1 of aid, there's a word called effective aid. How much actually trickles down to the country? And more often than not, a country will be lucky to have more than 50 cents of a dollar being spent actually in the country. Aid also benefits the country that's giving aid because some of the people that get jobs, some of the services that get provided are provided by companies from that country. So you said commitment to us over the past, for now to 2029, was about 443 million. Last year, I signed with the American ambassador a total of about 120 million, mainly for support to education, or health, agriculture, and governance. Now, the new U.S. government has a different disposition towards aid. And it's not only Liberia. Let it be clear. Liberia is not singularly targeted. Aid as a spending source has been targeted by the U.S. government. I'm not here to second guess that the merits and demerits. That's not my duty. We are one of the countries being affected. Now, we've done an assessment. As soon as this thing started, the Ministry of Finance did a report for the president, and we even reported to the legislature on what is happening and what measures we are taking and we intend to take. In fact, the measures include rationalizing expenditure. We already started. We didn't make big news about it. You remember a few weeks ago, we issued fiscal rules, and people were on Facebook. Many people commended what we were doing when we're talking about the amount of gas slips and others that people will be entitled to dramatically.
Okay, so that is the next piece I want to talk about here. And as I said, if you have time, maybe you can go search the video, the entire video, and watch it. It's just about over an hour. Um, there's a lot he talked about in terms of um, what they're going to do. Um, and this is not a secret. I think this is something we're all aware of in terms of this current administration in the U.S. what they are doing with aid, the cutting of USAID. USAID is what I would call it's an industry by itself. It's a $40 billion industry by itself out of the United States government. It's being funded every year, 40 billion, right? We are not the only country that is impacted from the cutting of aid. So this is a lot of country across the continent. Um, uh, Unfortunately for us, again, well, fortunately for us, we have I hate to use the word, we have a kind of a little bit of good relationship with the US. So despite this cutting that is happening, we still have a little bit of leg room to make certain things happen, like he alluded to, of the 43 million dollar commitment, which is again off budget. And these are the things we need to be talking about. This is a completely off budget. So these are not the thing we critique every year when the budget is passed, because it's not on the budget. It's not a line item on there, which is good. If we were a country of serious people, that's a lot of money every year. That's almost 100 million commitment every year to put into good use, right? But the point that I'm trying to make here is that something I think we have heard on different platforms as well. Africa or Liberia has been dependent on aid since our inception. This is not Gabriel saying this thing. This is your history. I don't know much about the politics, but I can tell you a lot about your economic history in terms of why we are still beating the same drum of we haven't developed, right? America has been supporting us. This is not a secret. They have been supporting us. They've been there, even though sometimes you look at the support they've given us and some of the things that they've done, you kind of question whether you should take the support or not take the support and do away with some of the things that they've done. But nevertheless, that support has been there, unwavering, right? To the tune, I think when the charge d'affaires of in Liberia, I think she put it out 160 million every year annually, and that has been a long, ongoing support. However, with this current administration in the U.S. cutting of aid, you know, there's an impact on the economy. One, on the side of the government, and also in the, if you want to call it private sector, because of a lot of NGOs in our country that are USAID funded, right? I was just on another show this morning, and we were talking about that as well. A lot of organizations in Liberia, NGOs, have laid off people who used to work for them, who were working on USAID project, right? Immediately, not just Liberia, across Sierra Leone, Ghana, Kenya, right? There are people that were just laid off. And if you are aware of the structure of our homes, right? If one person is working, that person is taking care of an entire household, right? This is not just your immediate family, but an entire household. Now imagine that income that is coming from that single person abruptly got terminated. That's not just going to impact that individual. That is an entire household that has now been impacted. Now you multiply that by hundreds, and I think maybe thousands of people in our country. Yes, we may not be feeling the impact right now, but in the next 2, 3 months, we're going to start seeing the impact in the economy. Additionally, if you look at the government, right, I think they estimated that the cutting of aid by USAID is about 60 million US dollars, right? Given we already run a tight budget, which is 800 million, where every penny it's spent on something, right? We've allocated it to different areas of the government, and so little to public investments. That means there's another 60 million, right, that we have to come up with. We have to squeeze it out of somewhere, right? And this takes me to the same conversation I was having earlier, the same point that I made earlier. If you are a minister of finance in the 21st century, in a poor country by the 21st century, but you're overseeing a budget that is so focused on expenditure, and in addition to that, you're getting a cut from a USAID that is now impacting your budget. If you've never had the audacity, the gall, the bravery, right, the boldness to say this is the opportunity to restructure our budget because of what just happened, this was a great opportunity. This is a great opportunity to do that. When I mean restructure the budget, meaning make it developmentally focused than what it currently is. We spend currently right now, if this is not Gabriel, as I said, go to your budget. I think it's just over 100 million that is being spent on public sector investment. Meaning after all the expenditure, these are things that are being spent on the little bit of services that are being produced in the country from the public sector side, just over 100 million, right? As a minister of finance in this century, this is or was an opportunity to allow you to restructure that budget, right? You have a great relationship with the president. If that means, because the budget is a law, if that means you have to revamp, augment that law and bring it to the president, get his approval, and again, I'm not a political person, so I could be missing some of the steps here, but you get the point that I'm trying to make. If that means you have to change the law around and get approval from the president to cut some of these scratch cards and incentives you guys are giving to people, this was an opportunity to do that. This is the perfect opportunity to do that. But we're here saying, oh, we see what we're going to do. We're taking measure. We're rationalizing. You talk about rationalizing expenditure, whatever that means. And this is why when people talk, you got to listen to them carefully. What does that even mean, rationalizing expenditure? You've already allocated your budget during the budget that was passed. Where are you going to take that 60 million cut from? You got to give details in terms of what is that going to come from? Okay, we're going to cut from here. We're going to do this. You don't have that. You don't have the leverage within your budget to do that. And this is why, as I said, always, and I'm not trying to beat on this guy, when you put people in position, you got to hold them accountable as well. I know a lot of people who glorify this guy, people venerate him, people that are close to me. People that could have been on the show with me but could not because of that. Because it's kind of this is in our society as well. You know somebody, you see the person not doing so well. Instead of you holding that person accountable, we rather take the passive route where we're quiet and allow the person to go into a deep hole, but we're talking behind them, right? So a lot of people venerate this guy. But I think there is a lot of expectation that he could have, that there's a lot that's expected from him than what he's currently doing. So this whole rationalizing expenditure and doing intervention is not going to cut it. We're going to be right back to the same drawing board in the next year with this budget issue. And if you don't solve it, it's going to continue in perpetuity. Here you are talking about taking on $1.3 billion debt, which leads me into my next point here. This is not on the video, which leads me into my next point of why I believe his assertion of getting us to a middle income state will not happen in the next 5 years, not even in the next 10 years. Until, as I said, until we have the courage, the audacity, the gall, the bravery, the boldness to face ourselves in the mirror. That means all those in the Senate, the legislators, the House of Representatives, to say, okay, we have to put ourselves in an austerity measure here. That means if the citizens in Liberia are suffering, let every one of us suffer together for the next 5-10 years. That means we will have to bring the budget to the drawing board and shift it around to make it developmentally focused. And this is why I believe we're not getting there. I'll give a few points here, and I will end the show shortly. Right. One, we have to look at our tax policies. Right. This is something I'm very aware of. Currently, we have, I think our corporate tax rate is about 20% or so, and somebody can keep me honest here. Our income tax, meaning for those who are working in Liberia right now, if you're making let's say $1,000 a month, right? You're paying $250 because the tax rate income tax rate is 25%. How is that sustainable for the average person who wants to make a living, right? So you need to look at your tax rate. Two, you need to look at industrializing the country. This is not a conversation that he himself can have by himself. He has to bring the Minister of Commerce on the board together. He has to bring the business leaders to a conversation. He also has to bring the the head of LRA to the table to look at how you can expand your tax base. I said this before on another show. Perfect example. If you walk around in Liberia, which I like to do when I go to Liberia, look at buildings, houses, abandoned. So they're literally like eyesores, right? But those buildings have owners. They're not being taxed. So they don't care. They don't have any, you're not nudging them to do something about it. Because if you put a tax on that building, it will force that person to do something about it. But they're not paying taxes on those. The other thing, we have a database at the archive of every land that is registered in our country. Whether it's vacant or you have structure on it, we have access to that. There's database. You can create a tax structure where you have a tax on vacant land. You have a tax on properties that have lands that have structure on them, meaning buildings on them, right? So in essence, you have access to every property in our country that you can broaden your tax base on to collect tax base from. The second part, businesses. I'm a big proponent of industrialization. The closest we have ever come, or the closest we've ever come to industrializing was through the Tauber administration. I think he was the only president who had that vision to say the only way we can become self-sufficient is through industrialization. Ever since then, no president, not Ellen, not Julia, certainly not this current administration, has any idea in terms of how to industrialize. You cannot become competitive in that region if you don't industrialize, you don't focus on industrialization. Industrialization meaning you have to make it easy for people to build industries. if you look at the sector in Liberia, sectors, various sector, Liberia, I call it the 180-year-old fragmented virgin land. Because now one sector, now one industry in our country, now one person in that industry in our country in Liberia has a controlling market share in any sector. Now in hospitality, where there's a lot of development happening, hotels, now in banking, now in law, now in construction, now in agriculture, and you can name it, you can go on. So we're pretty much fragmented as a country. But how do you industrialize? As a minister of finance, this is what you got to think about, right? Now, you might pose the question to me to say, what would the minister of finance want to industrialize Liberia? Well, if you do that, you not only broaden your tax base, right? But you create what we call the tax machine that continue to fund the government in perpetuity. Pretty much what we have here in the United States or in the West, right? You create a vehicle that supports, that fund the government's agenda in perpetuity, that makes it easy to collect your taxes, make it easy for people to register businesses, make it easy for them to pay their taxes. This is what industrialization does. These are the kind of ideas in terms of how to expand the country tax base, industrialize it, to make it easy for people to pay their taxes and register business. In other countries, it takes about 1 day to register business. In Liberia, you got to expedite, you got to pay money, you got to pay somebody to do that, right? So I don't, as I said, this is not a show to seem as if I'm beating up on this guy. It is just, if you don't know, you don't know. And if you're limited, you're limited. Or maybe his hands are tied in terms of what he can do. So he come and espouse these ideas and nobody calls him out on it. I think there's a lot of leverage that the Minister of Finance has that he's not leveraging, right? In terms of really coalescing people around you to develop the country, meaning working with other ministries such as the Ministry of Commerce and the Liberia Revenue Authority, or even the business community, the banking community, right? To make it easy for other to industrialize the country. Last point, as I said, these ideas are not far-fetched. These are not far-fetched ideas. These are not things that are Gabriel is just thinking out of a moonshot idea that he just putting out there. Look at your neighbors, your peers. Look at Ivory Coast. I was in Ivory Coast in 2023 for almost a month. That month that I spent in Ivory Coast, we were out of power for 5 minutes. 5 minutes, just 5 minutes. 5 minutes. The same thing, 2024. I was in Ghana for almost 3 months. 3 months I was in our country. The rent, not even the entire country, a community in our country lost power for 30 minutes. 30 minutes, just 30 minutes. The next day, I was sitting in a living room watching that on the news. Because the people were protesting. They called their radio station, they called news stations. They were complaining why they had to be out of power for 30 minutes. They were losing businesses and all. This is a country with people who are not passive, who demand a lot from their government. In our country, I always say this, we're passive. We're very passive. When I mean passive, we will see somebody doing wrong, but we won't say that to them like, hey, even if somebody you know, we won't say that to them like, hey, what you're doing is wrong. So we don't demand a lot from our government. Go to Liberia, like somebody was saying, you know, we all don't like to say, oh, we'll leave it with God, or leave that thing with God. And so that same idea, we take it and, you know, bring it to our government. So we don't demand a lot from our citizens, I mean, our elected official. I like to use the example of Kenya. When the current government wanted to pass a finance bill, there was a protest that made the president recant that bill. null and void. Nigeria, when they assembled the SAR group, that special military group, people protested until they disbanded that group. Every country, meaning because they demand a lot from the government, they understand that those in government are meant to serve them. Why? Because these are the people that are paying the tax dollars for these people to be where they are. So you demand a lot for the service, for the money the taxes you pay. In our country, we don't do that. And so we come, when people like the Minister of Finance give speeches like this, we clap without even going into depth about what are these things that he's saying are actually true? What are they even achievable? Again, as I said, he made a speech. To the credit of the journalist, he pushed back on some of the things the Minister of Finance was saying. Pushed back on some of the questions. It almost, at one point, it almost felt like as if they were arguing, right? Because he knew that most of the things the guy was saying was lies, like they were not true. But you don't want to argue with somebody on the network, right? So he pushed back on him. But since then, I didn't see anybody else covering this thing. Like, these are outrageous, outlandish assertions that you just put out there just because the people that don't question, that don't critique what you say, they accept it and they clap for you. Oh, that Minister of Finance. There are people like myself. Like I said, I know people like myself who know him, who are numbers people who very finance, who are versed in these things. But again, as I said, they're either passive or, again, like I said, they know him. They don't want to critique him. So they stay quiet. And he put out these projections. You cannot, and I will say this live, you cannot get us to a middle income state in 5 years. That is a blatant lie. You cannot. Not on the revenue you're collecting. Not even if you did backflip, you brought Christ himself and put him in power. And you make them pray like you wanted people to pray. You cannot. These are lies. And so these are the reason why we need to be pushing back on these kind of assertions. As I said, you have to be an optimistic person, but in that optimism, you have to be realistic. Numbers don't lie, but people use numbers to lie. And he was using the budget and the aid that will to make all these assertions. As I say, I don't want to beat up on the guy, but these are just my opinion, right? Just give us a quick minute. I think we have a few questions or comments here. Let's dive into them. We'll take them and we'll wrap up shortly. Okay, these are all from YouTube. What's this guy name? Pink O, whatever you call yourself. Hopefully I'm pronouncing it properly. He said, industrialization in what field? Textile, energy, mining, agriculture. You have to choose one. You can't industrialize at all at once. Okay, so I don't think is it Pink, whatever, Pink 0 or O or whatever your name is. So when I talk about industrialization, this is, if you look at any developed country or any developing country, such as the South American country, you look at Mexico, Brazil, Chile, all those South American countries, right? If you look at the Asian country as well, right? These, when I mean industrialization, this is not something that I'm saying that the government itself can do, but creating the environment in which these things can happen. As I said, I was just on another show earlier, right? How do you industrialize? You enable the environment to do that. Perfect example. So the B Mountain, iron ore that is being taken out of the country. Do you think the government doesn't have the ability to make sure that those iron ore get processed in our country. You can do that and create a whole steel industry, right? Meaning, what I don't want to stay too long here. Perfect example, right? So let's say you have a B mountain producing iron ore or gold in Liberia, right? And you want them to process that in Liberia. But you might say the government doesn't have the ability to allow them to do that. Yes, they have the ability to do that. If you mandate them to process that in Liberia, someone from the private sector will say, you know what, I can partner with this B Mountain and create the plant that will process these minerals right here in Liberia. What does that mean? That individual may not have all the capital to do that. The government can say, you know what, since you want to do something like this, you're going to be creating this amount of jobs. We will guarantee half of the money for you to do that. Go get the other half either from the bank or you can raise it privately, and you can build that factory and process these minerals right in this country. Right then and there, you can create an industry, right? If you can start processing iron ore, the next person will say, oh, if this guy can process iron ore in this country, we can do the same thing with gold, right? And we can do the same thing with any other commodity in the country, from agriculture to any other commodity in our country. So it's a process, it's a strategy. This is what other countries are doing to get to middle income, right? This is not just getting to middle income, but you're creating an environment where people in the country now can build wealth in the country. That individual who will be creating that factories, or those people that will be creating those factories, this is Liberians. You're empowering that will now have money to do other things. If I build a factory, that factory becomes successful, I can branch into other areas. I can go into agriculture, right? I can go into maybe hospitality, real estate. This is how you create wealth. This is what I mean when I say industrialization. I think sometimes what we do in our country, we put all the onus on government to create those places. And I believe if you and I think that government is the one that's going to create get us to the middle income state, we will be here for another 180 years complaining about the same thing, right? I don't think government is the one that can do that. You have to create the environment, set the example, put the strategy out, and people will get it. Private citizens will do that. So that's what I mean when I say industrialization. And yes, you can do all at once, going all at once. Two things can be true at the same time. All right, one more question from here, and I'll wrap up. Wherever you are, thank you for as I said, sharing your thoughts and joining us. You said the government absolutely can be the catalyst of industrialization. I agree with your sentiment. Your critique is fitting. I just want you to be more specific with your prescription. Um, I don't know what you mean by prescription, so maybe you can clarify that a little bit more. You said rubber would be the easiest place to if industrialization, right? But that will require nationalizing the farms. Are you in agreement with that? So I don't think you need to nationalize the rubber industry in order to industrialize. And here's why. And I think if my memory can serve me right, we did a show here on the rubber industry in Liberia. It is a monopoly that we don't want to admit. Firestone has a complete monopoly on rubber, the purchasing of rubber in Liberia, right? Um, you don't have to nationalize it. Yes, they might have the dominant force in terms of the price they can pay for rubber, but if you start enabling small um, producers of those, there are other small producers of farmers in our country too. You can create, maybe a competitor in that industry, right? If you want to industrialize, or you can even mandate Firestone or whoever they are right now, whoever owns that company now, to produce, rubber bowls or materials right in Liberia. You don't have to nationalize it. I think if you go to nationalizing routes, it creates a little bit of what's happening in those Sahel countries, the Burkina Faso and Niger. It will create a little bit of tension because these are private capital people that came in and spend their capital to build in the country. So you don't want to come be the person who say, oh, we're going to nationalize it and take it and do what we want to do with it. No, you can industrialize by enabling your citizens in terms of, as I said, private capital has the biggest has the ability to transform a country. But I don't think that's a different conversation we're not ready to have yet. So that's what I meant. And I think we're right over the hour mark. I wanted to keep this thing to an hour. Again, let me get this comment out of here. Again, as I said, the sole reason of even doing a show today was when I watched the speech by the Minister of Finance. As I said, I watched it twice. One, I was at work. I spent an hour watching that, and when I got home, I spent another time, another hour watching, because most of the assertion that he made in the video are just outlandish. They're outrageous. They're to not be too disrespectful. They're pretty much lies that cannot be done in the time frame that he's put on them. Even the resources that are available for him to supposedly get us to a middle income state, you cannot do it on the budget we have. You cannot do it on the state of economy we have. You cannot do it at the pace at which we're growing, right? Unless you have to do something radically, you have to do something radical, which is to revamp the budget, to change the budget law, to make it developmentally focused. And that's the goal, the bravery, the boldness that no Minister of Finance has. And this is why we continue to do this in perpetuity. So to come on here to put out these claims that you're going to get us to a middle income state when your almost entire budget is spent on expenditure. You have $2.6 billion in debt on a $300 million debt service that you cannot even pay the entire thing. That you're building a debt balloon right now that when that debt balloons, when everything comes due, we're going to be in a serious problem that nobody's talking about. But yet still, you're still borrowing. You're thinking about borrowing to add to it, right? So in the midst of all of that, you have the gall, the audacity to say that you're going to get us to a middle income, a low middle. Like, can you imagine? You know what it takes to get us to? Have you lived in the country that you live in? Maybe it's different from the Liberia you live in. Is different from the one we see every day when we go to Liberia, or the one that every Liberian lives in, right? Go to Cinco. Go to right at the LRA place there that where they collect revenue. There's a Bible stand right on the left there at those interjunction. The moment you step out the side off the main road, you're in a place of dust. Those communities are right in Central Monrovia. They're not paved. Go right down to point 4. Go down to point 4 and see how people are living. Walking around Monrovia, as I said, walking around Liberia, it's good and all to sit in AC field card and drive around and make all these assertions. It's one thing to get down and go to those areas and experience how Liberians are living. Then you will be able to align your ambition, your ambition as a Minister of Finance with the reality that is happening. And I will leave you with this. And a professor once told me this. He said it's good to build models, meaning it's good to run projections. It's good to come out here and run numbers behind computers. Oftentimes, you should step from behind that computer and see this model that you're building, whether it makes sense with the reality of what you're building it for. It's oftentimes sometimes we sit behind these things and talk and we want to do, but step from behind your comfort zone, your models and build things that you're building in those offices, and see how those models align with the reality that is on the ground. And I think sometimes, and most times, those of you in those positions, you fail to do that. So this is why every time you come, you say these things, there's a big disconnect from the reality and what you put out there. So as I said, I wasn't going to talk about this. We actually had a series that we were actually doing on your AID agenda that we're going to continue. Initially, this is what we wanted to do, but I felt that, when I saw that video, I just thought it can't be sitting out there. People are not, and I'm surprised that people are not reacting to it and to the way that I am. I was very, very disappointed. And for you carry on. But, again, this is what we do in our body of politics. We talk politics, but the actual thing that impacts politics, which is the economy and everything that impacts it, we gloss over it. We forget it. But yet still we rumble and quamble about politics. But that's my take. I hope you took away something from this. And again, next week, as I said, we're going to continue the series of diving into the government aid agenda. We started, I think we did one episode. We're supposed to do a whole series. So I will be doing that series, continuing to really unpack the whole aid agenda that he talked about. In it, like he said, they want to get us to a low middle income country by 2029, and also to grow the economy. So I hope you took something away from it. What's your name? Pinko, whatever your name is, you're hiding. Thank you for your perspective. I really appreciate it. As I said, it's one thing to have questions, but it's a good thing to have perspective, because it's good for us to look at things from other people's perspective. So thank you for watching. Hopefully we'll see you here next Saturday. And on that note, next Saturday I will hope to get the live video fixed to have this thing broadcast on Facebook as well. So I couldn't figure this out. I was trying to get it done while we were on the show, but I couldn't do it. So see you next week. And as we always say, we're all Liberians. Whether you like what I said or not, whether you think that the Minister of Finance can get us to a middle income state by 2029, whether you think we can industrialize or not, fundamentally, there's a common denominator, and that fact is that we're all Liberians. And that is what I'm going to leave you with. Adios.
We are Liberians.